Hello everyone, thank you for clicking on my video. Today we're going to be learning about the anatomy of the brain, a very interesting topic obviously. It's the most complex organ in the human person and in any living creature really. And what is most important first to stress here is that not everything about the brain is known. There's still so much research going into how it works and the processes behind it, both conscious and unconscious, and also that it's not just several parts of one organ that are working on their own. It's just a whole map of neural networks that are just working together in unison to keep the person functioning. And yeah, so many different areas affect each other in ways that are still unknown, and some ways are known, as we'll discuss, but that is highly something we need to stress here. Anyway, let's get into it. The first area we're going to talk about is called the hindbrain. Now, it's found at the top of the spine, at the very lower end of the brain, and the area we're going to focus on within the hindbrain is called the medulla oblongata. Now, this is an extension of the spine. It's involved in things such as, very critical things such as cardiovascular control, breathing, heart rate, stuff like that. And it's also involved in reflexes such as coughing, sneezing, and vomiting. It also connects to muscles in the face, neck, and shoulders, as we can see here. And due to its vital importance to some of the unconscious bodily functions, damage can be very threatening to one's life. The next area we're going to focus on is called the midbrain. Now, we'll only touch on this. But what's important to note is that there are a huge amount of processes that are involved in the midbrain, despite it being a very small part of the brain, as you can see in this diagram. We're just going to talk about a quick bit about the superior and inferior colliculus. Now, the superior colliculus is involved in eye movements and vision information, and the inferior colliculus is involved in auditory information. Now, finally, here we're talking about the section of the brain that includes some more conscious processes. So, the forebrain. So, first of all, we'll talk about the amygdala, very interesting part of the brain. We'll have some videos for this later on, but what's important to note about it is that it's highly involved with the sterning of fear and the fight, flight, and freeze response whenever danger is present or whenever someone is under stress. And it is also linked to aspects of aggression. And also there have been studies that have stimulated the amygdala or certain points in the amygdala in animals, and it causes them to elicit very aggressive behavior. And now the thalamus is a part of the forebrain, and this is a really, really important reference point for navigating the brain. Basically, most sensory information is relayed through the thalamus, except for taste, I believe. And then this information is then passed on to the cerebral cortex for more or further processing. And the cerebral cortex is what we're going to discuss next. So the cerebral cortex is the outer part of the brain, so it's what we see, the wrinkly part basically, and we have all these lobes on either side or hemisphere of the brain. And what's important to note about the cerebral cortex is this is where all the what we call higher functions occur. So when we think, when we make a decision, when we memorize something, these things are mostly done in the cerebral cortex. So we'll get into that now, starting with the frontal lobes. So involved with aspects of voluntary movement, memory, and personality. Also has the primary motor cortex, which controls most voluntary movements. And what's interesting here is that bigger sections of the primary motor cortex are devoted to finer movements, such as the hands and the mouth. And this is because we need more brain processing for more intricate movements, which is quite interesting. Next, we have the parietal lobe. So this covers sensory information, specifically in regarding touch and spatial awareness and navigation. It also has within it the somatosensory cortex, and this is where all the touch information, sensory information, is processed. So pain, or if something is touching you, so pressure, or heat and temperature, all of that is sent through the nerves to the somatosensory cortex. And now we have the occipital lobes, which are pretty much dedicated to visual processing, mainly. And we know this because there is a form of blindness called cortical blindness, where people don't have damage to the eyes, but rather they have damage to the nerves connecting the occipital lobes to the eyes. And so there's nothing wrong with their eyes, it's just the nerves in the brain. It's quite an interesting case of how the brain can infect the senses. And finally, in the cerebral cortex, we have the temporal lobes, and these are mainly for auditory processing and memory and facial recognition, as we can see. And it also houses the primary auditory cortex, which processes most sound information that we receive. So right now, your primary auditory cortex is working because you're listening to me. Your auditory nerve is carrying all the information from your ears to the primary auditory cortex. It also has the ability to locate sounds, so we know where an object is making sound from in our world around us. This has actually quite an adaptive purpose, as it allows us, or allowed our ancestors at least, to hear where predators and potential dangers were coming from. Alright everyone, thank you very much for watching. That kind of wraps it up. Again, the brain is very complex and I haven't even scratched the surface of the many processes and functions that it has, but hopefully you've learned a little bit about everything. All the lobes and the cerebral cortex and the hind, mid and forebrain. Hopefully you learned some stuff about that. Hopefully we can delve more into certain parts of the brain in the future, because there are really interesting parts that need a lot more detail. That's for sure. Anyway, our next video will be on how the brain works, so most importantly neurons and how they connect and how they communicate with each other. So thank you for watching. Any recommendations, put it in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.